welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan83. Additionally, you can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. And of course, you can find our subsidiaries, the Full Court Press, basketball, football, and MMA. I got a kind of a confession to make, right? It's just a football fan, right? It's what I've been my whole life. Just been a football fan. I grew up watching the Denver Broncos and Cleveland Browns in the 80s when they were basically rivals. They were consistently playing each other in the AFC Championship games. As a matter of fact, I think it happened 3 times in the 80s, if I remember correctly. Then, of course, you had regular season games. It was just, it was becoming so much. And most people know how I grew up watching Denver. You know, John Elway, Mark Jackson, Vance Johnson, Steve Sewell, Sammy Winder, Carl Mecklenburg, you know, Craig Jones. It was just, that's what I grew up on. As far as the Cleveland Browns go, you know, I grew up watching Bernie Kosar, Brian Brennan, running backs like Mack and Biner. Castile was a defensive back that just was phenomenally physical. And that's the way that era was. The Cleveland Browns were regarded as a physical football team. The Cleveland Browns, nobody wanted to go and play a game in Cleveland. It was cold. It was dark. It was nasty weather. It was windy. You had the dog pound. You had rabid fans everywhere. You know, I mean, just the whole aura and mystique of everything. Then, of course, on top of that, they were such a hard-nosed football team. You know, Marty Schottenheimer, was such a phenomenal coach back then. He would have got a Super Bowl had it not been for John Elway. I really believe that, especially those first couple of Cleveland Browns teams from, basically 87, 88. I mean, those teams potentially, I think, one of them would have beat the Giants or Washington. That last team, when Denver beat them in the AFC Championship game and Denver went and got smoked by Frisco, I think anybody from the AFC that year would have got smoked, being that Denver was 11-5, and I think the next best team was Cleveland 9-6-1, if I remember correctly. So after that, it was terrible for the AFC that year. But the point is that's what I grew up watching: physical Cleveland Browns football. I don't know that they can get back to that. Maybe under Baker Mayfield they can start, with a physical style of play. You know, the word is that Duke Johnson is wanting a trade out of Cleveland. But what I'm getting at here is you start getting into the 90s, they're still a good football team. You've got Eric Metcalf, you've got Vinny Testaverde for a little while. I mean, you've got some great players on that football team, but then they sell, they go to Baltimore, they win a couple of titles, they bring the team back. And as the case is, most of the time when you're basically an expansion team that's not viewed that way, but that's what they were when the team came back. They're basically an expansion team. It is exceptionally difficult to build from the ground up. And maybe it's a nostalgia thing for me. I don't know what it is. Maybe I feel sorry for Cleveland and their fans. I've made fun of them. There's 101 memes out there. Everybody's made fun of them. You know, the quarterback situation has been horrendous. 27, 30 quarterbacks, something like that they've ran through now in the last 18, 19 years, 20 years. They're due. It's time. I am rooting for the Cleveland Browns this season, and that is coming from a diehard Broncos fan, a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. I mean, that's the way that it is. I grew up appreciating other football teams. I grew up appreciating the Raiders, appreciating the Cleveland Browns. I respected what those teams brought to the table. It wasn't going to be a pushover win, ever, period. And I would love for it to get back to that way. I think the game of football is better when the Browns, or at least at the bare minimum, a 97 football team every year. The NFC North, for a long time, has been a staple of what people love the most about football. The Cincinnati Bengals with Boomer Esiason in the 80s, they were a little flashy, but they still had the physicality aspect of it. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've always been regarded as a hard-nosed football team. The Steel Curtain, right? from the days of Terry Bradshaw up to, Ben Roethlisberger and everybody in between, right? You look at the Cleveland Browns and what they've represented to the NFL and football. It's where it all began. Canton, Ohio, it's where everything started. And you look at the names that have gone through there, man. Jim Brown, Bernie Kosar, Ernest Biner. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me that the teams with it seems like the most tradition in football, for the most part, have the most difficult time keeping up with the NFL and how it's done now, with maybe the exception of the Green Bay Packers. Even then, over the last few years, with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt, how difficult has it been for them to stay a top-tier team? I personally believe that football is better when Cleveland is winning. The fanfare, everybody, I think, likes watching the Cleveland Browns. I think everybody, to some degree, likes watching them to win. And, even if you don't like them, hey, man, they're a rival football team. To hell with them. Well, you still like watching them to see them lose. And if it's a hell of a football game, your team may get, beat, but you still look at it and go, man, you know what? That was a hell of a football game to watch. I mean, come on. Tell me somewhere deep down inside, you're not rooting for this thing with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield to find a way to work. This could be potentially, I'm not saying it will be, I'm saying potentially, some of the best football that we've seen in a long time in the NFL. There is a tremendous buzz going on right now in the city of Cleveland, and it's giving the NFL a different feel. It feels different going into the season when you say to yourself, boy, being a Cleveland Brown fan this year, that sounds like a good idea. That might be a bandwagon that I want to jump on. I mean, tell me deep down inside, you don't think to yourself, well, Cleveland's got a real shot. Cleveland can make this thing happen this year. They can make this thing work. All the organizational issues, all the dysfunction that's happened, all the quarterbacks that have been set up for failure, they finally stick with the coach who gets things done, right? They turn an interim coach into a head coach. How many times does that happen? Almost never. But they have finally somebody figured out a winning formula, and we're just going to stick with it. We're not going to go out and find some outsider. We're not going to try and bring in some new hotshot coach. We're not going to grab an OC or a DC from another place. We're not going to pick a former head coach who couldn't get it done somewhere else. We're going to build from within. That's what an organization is supposed to do, is build within and, in some capacity, listen to their fans. The fans should have an enormous say-so in what happens with their team. They're the ones buying the tickets, buying the apparel, watching it on TV. They're the ones that are supporting everything that you do. And without a huge fan base, your team collapses and does not exist, period. And I'm rooting for Cleveland Browns. I'm rooting for Cleveland Brown fan. I hope the best for you guys this year. I just want to see Cleveland yell out Cleveland Rocks again, right? Shout out to Drew Carey. Guys, I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. When you share my posts, don't forget to use the hashtag Don't You Dare Touch That Dial. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.